We are back, episode 49, with our very, very special guest. We're very happy to have Andy Hale. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, my friend.
It's an honor. I'm flattered. I can't believe you having me on here. I got a gin and tonic in my hands.
Yeah.
I'm hanging out with you guys. This is, you made my day.
I think you are the first Emmy-nominated guest that we've had on the podcast. Wow. So we're breaking records. You know,
you can throw a couple more things. We're the first nominated Emmy. You just,
Yeah.
Yeah. You're
I literally am flattered, and I don't know what you want to talk about, but I'm game. So
yeah, I mean, you have such an incredible career. Civil rights attorney, 30 years experience, Emmy nominated, producer, documentary maker, podcaster.
We can just go into that real quick.
Yeah, so many cool things. What did you get
nominated for?
So I had a local, I owned and hosted a local TV program in Chicago for 5-6 years called Case Files Chicago.
Okay.
And it ran every Saturday night, and we would profile 2 unsolved murders. And the format was we would have the family on talking about like they lost their son or their daughter.
Yeah.
Usually it was gun violence of some sort. Then we'd have a detective talking about the crime. Then we'd reenact the crime. And then we would have a tip line. We would try to solve it. So we got nominated for a local Emmy for that show. Because a lot of the episodes we had.
So it was all super like hyper local. So it was like Chicago cases, Chicago. Yeah. That's awesome.
Chicago cases.
Did you have like in the reenactments some of the actual detectives like playing their part in the reenactment stuff?
We'd have actors playing like the crime, but then the detectives would actually be walking the scene and like showing you like, this is the dumpster where you found the body, and then the guy ran down this alley and the bullet trail was here. And the heartbreaking thing about it for me was gun violence now has become like a passion project for me.
Yeah.
Because what I got to see was most of these families came from poor neighborhoods. Most of these families were people of color. And the moms would say this to me all the time. Like, I didn't want him to leave the house. I was so worried he was going to leave the house. Yeah. He would just go down to the corner store. Like you went down to buy that, gin and tonic.
Yeah.
The mom would have been like, oh, damn, like, I hope Tony comes back.
Yeah.
And at the time I was doing the show, my son was in high school. Hayden, who you've met.
Yeah.
I never once to date have thought, God, I hope he comes home tonight.
Right.
And I've seen so many, and people tend to think in Chicago, especially with gun violence, they tend to think it's like all like, bad guy A shooting bad guy B, and it's not. Yeah. There's so many innocent victims. Yeah. Kids, we've had kids in their house, bullet comes through the wall, like girls reading in her bedroom, bullet hits her, like, and I just got so sympathetic to these families who lost somebody to gun violence. So we would interview like the mom, the sisters, the brothers.
Yeah.
And it just became like, I was like, when I go to take my dog for a walk around the block, I'm not looking over my shoulder. I'm not wondering if I'm going to get shot.
Right.
And in most of these neighborhoods, even where the shootings occur, most of the people on the block are good people. Because I've gone to those neighborhoods to interview witnesses.
Yeah.
But there's one fucking house
where
all the bad dudes are. Yeah. And, they now live in your block,
Yeah.
And it used to be like, I think, if I had a beef with you, Eric, somebody would come and just try to shoot you. Now it's like, oh, Eric's at a block party. Just spray the crowd with bullets. Yeah. We don't even hit you.
Right.
And like 8 other people get shot,
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a very long-winded way of answering your question about how that came about. But it was really awesome doing that show.
When did it end?
Probably ended about 5 years ago. I got a great website though, cscf.com is I think. Well, it's casefileschicago.com. If you go to it, you ever see the book Humans in New York? You know what I'm talking about?
No.
Humans in New York, that's a whole great story. You should look it up. It's a guy from Chicago, moved to New York. He quit his job as like a stockbroker. He wanted to be a photographer. He just started taking pictures of people on the street, and he'd have a little story about him. Hey, I met Tony. What's your gig?
Yeah.
And it became a huge success. Website, book. So if you go to my website, there's just like faces, probably like 5 across, 6, 7, 8 rows down of episodes we've run, and people, you can click on each one and it's a little short video of the person.
Oh, wow.
And it finally just got to be too much. Like I wound up just this was on a Fox affiliate, and it came on. It was a great lead, and I had Seinfeld on before our show. And it just got to be like, I wasn't really savvy about how to monetize it and whatnot, you know? Yeah. And at just some point, it just got to be a little bit expensive, but I miss it. Because I could have kept doing it. I would love to be doing it now.
Yeah.
And it was such meaningful stuff, meeting these families and trying to get justice.
Yeah.
It's super hard to solve these cases because most times, even though there's people in the neighborhood who know kind of who did it.
Yeah, they don't want to say.
They don't want to say because it's the old, snitches get stitches.
Yeah.
But it was an amazing, rewarding experience. It's one of the best of all the things I've done. By far, probably the most rewarding. The people I met, heartbreak too, but just incredible.
Are you still working with people? I think the last time I spoke with you, you were saying that you were doing something like an innocence project kind of thing where you're trying to get people exonerated. And
I've got a handful of people I'm trying to help prove their innocence. The main one is Chester Weger, who's 85. I think you guys know that story. Got convicted of a famous case in the Chicago area called the Starved Rock murders in 1960. Okay. That was before even I was born. He's my main one. Mm-hmm. He served over 60 years in prison. There was an HBO doc about it. It came out a few years ago called The Murders of Starved Rock. And then there was a guy who worked on a case in Peoria. Well, let me backtrack. This is the point I want to make, even though you're not even asking me this question. Okay. I'm going to just
make that point regardless.
I want to make this point. It's really, and I've got a whole episode about this on my Connect podcast. It's about you create your own opportunities. Mm-hmm. And I could give you the whole backstory, but I met through a whole kind of like longer answer. I met this guy, Sean Reck, who had a production company. Mm-hmm. He was the one producing the Case File Chicago show because he had it in Chicago, Miami, LA, and Cleveland. Mm-hmm. I heard about the show and I thought it was cool. I just decided to be an advertiser on there. Then after like a year, he's like, "Hey man, I'm trying to like cut back. Do you want to just buy me out and you have the Chicago show and be yours?" I'm like, "Okay." So I bought the rights to the Chicago show, became my show. I produced it, I hosted it. Mm-hmm. And then I met him. And then I heard about a crazy case in Chicago where this guy got convicted of a double murder and he got released from prison and another guy went in. And this story made no sense because the guy who got out seemed guilty.
Okay.
So I told this story to Sean, and long story short, we decided to make a documentary movie about it. We had never done that before. Yeah. He was just doing TV. I hadn't done anything. Mm-hmm. It became a documentary called A Murder in the Park. We had never done this before. Mm-hmm. Because the story was so compelling, we were able to get like the top documentary film agents, a company called Submarine in New York, who had repped many of like the Academy Award winning doc films over the years. Hmm. They repped us. We were able to sell it. It got on Showtime. It got on Netflix. It was in theaters. And then that was about a guy named Alstory Simon. He got out of, and I hadn't done any of this wrongful conviction stuff at this point. Yeah. I was actually defending Chicago police officers, which I still do.
Yeah.
He gets out and he says, "Can you look into the case of my best friend, Cleve Heidelberg? He's innocent too." Well, I wound up looking at this guy's case and worked 2-3 years on it, and I got him out of prison after 47 years.
Jesus. What was he in, murder?
He was in he got arrested for shooting and killing a Peoria police officer. Oh. And at the time I was like, God, does this have to be his crime? Because like I'm defending police officers, you know?
But you know, the thing is you're defending like justice though. You know what I mean? Like that's what you got to look at. And sometimes, there's like that, because we've talked about this. That's kind of how we got like rapport going as far as like the true crime stuff. And there's like, I think there's a lot of good intention with like the law enforcement stuff, but sometimes you get tunnel vision and they're going to make this person guilty. And this is their guy and they'll just overlook everything else. And for me, the wrongful conviction thing is like, is automatically I would kill myself. Like the dude that's in jail for 65 years, I would have killed myself the first 65 seconds. Like I'm claustrophobic, let alone all the jail rape. Like there's no way I'm that optimistic that I'd get out. And this guy's, about to be 85.
He's 85. What I say is, you don't have to pick a team. I'm on team justice, like you said. I mean, I think a lot of people that are like super pro police are like, they are like pro police for everything.
Yeah.
Even the cases where like, George Floyd got killed. Is like, come on, dude. I mean, you're supporting this? Like, it's unnecessary.
Police are human beings. Human beings make mistakes and errors and stuff.
And on the flip side, I think a lot of people who are like wrongful conviction, some advocates tend to be anti-police for everything.
Right.
And what I say is, I just call them like I see them.
Right.
Every case is decided on its own facts.
It's case specific.
And what I'll say about Chicago police, it's had a very kind of checkered history. 10,000 police officers, let's say, 10%'s 1,000, 1%'s 100, all right? So if you got 100 knuckleheads out there right now on the streets, right now there's 100 knuckleheads driving around in police cars, doing stupid stuff.
Yeah.
That's who you're reading about in the paper.
Yeah.
And they're tainting it for the other 99%. And I've met some amazing men and women.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm kind of in a unique spot where in the true crime world, I like I said, I'm on team justice. There's justice on both sides of the V, is like I like to say, because like in a lawsuit, it's like, plaintiff versus defendant. Yeah. There's justice on either side. It just depends on the facts of the case.
Yeah.
How hard has it been though? Like that Bone Creek that you and I were talking about. That is a case where, like, I feel the evidence was like there was so much evidence against that he didn't do it, but the system itself was so ingrained in the verdict and saying like, well, that's what it was. So we have to ignore all this mountain of evidence that says this guy didn't do it. But because the system said he's guilty, that's what we're stuck with. And where it's like, I feel that has to be such like the basically like the hardest part of getting any of these guys out of jail or the convictions overturned is trying to like change that main system.
You kind of hit the nail on the head. So you're talking about Bone Valley, which is a case in Lakeland, Florida.
Bone Valley, I'm sorry.
Where
Bone
a guy named
Creek
Leo Schofield got arrested for his wife's murder.
Yeah.
There was all this evidence. Another guy did it. This is the problem, and I've run into this in my cases. State's attorneys' offices are incredibly biased. What's crazy to me is it's not on your watch. Like in my Starved Rock murder case, I got a state's attorney's office now reviewing the evidence from 1960.
Yeah.
But they are trying to preserve the victory. They're trying to preserve the trial win. Like they still feel like they're part of the prosecution team. So the problem is, I think, me personally, a lot of people who have become prosecutors are so baked in to that side, like locking away bad guys.
Yeah.
They are not open-minded to the evidence. And a prosecutor's job by statute is to seek justice.
Right.
Yeah.
By statute, not merely to convict. So in my Cleve Heidelberg case in Peoria, and in my Starved Rock murders case with Chester Weger, both times I go to the state's attorney's office with what I think is overwhelming evidence. Mm-hmm. And you know what? What's egregious is not only do they not agree with me, or they won't even like interview my witnesses. They don't even want to hear. Like, it's just egregious. I'd love to do a whole documentary or some kind of media project about this, because I think it's a real problem.
It really is.
If I was a state's attorney right now and you came to me, Tony, and said, hey, can you look into this case? I think this guy's wrongfully convicted. I'd say, show me what you got. I may or may not agree, but let's check it out.
Yeah.
Let's, in my Starved Rock murders case, they opposed me even looking at the physical evidence. That got overruled. Then they opposed me testing it. I mean, like,
I feel like there's so many there's so many roadblocks that they have the upper hand on, like just stopping, and it's
unbelievable.
It's crazy.
I think the biggest issue is, I mean, there always are going to be mistakes, in cases sometimes, and I mean,
like admitting that they're wrong.
Yeah,
I feel is like the main thing of takeaway from that Bone Valley, where they're like, oh yeah, like we just basically don't want to admit that we did something wrong because it's going to make all of us look bad. It's going to make our whole system that we've been like, we're the
and a lot
right
of time,
side.
Yeah, it's just like protecting the W, as I call it.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Like protecting the W, the win.
It'd be one thing if it was your W, but it's like your teams, like, generations, in past and stuff.
And then the repercussions of like doing that, knowing that like somebody has been innocently incarcerated for something they didn't do. And then you're just like, well, we want the win though. It's like, well, what about this life and the families and everything?
In my Cleve Heidelberg case in Peoria. And so, by the way, I'm working on a project. We filmed for 2 years, all the court hearings to try to prove his innocence. And then we filmed like the happy ending. I can actually send you some of the rough cut. We're trying to like put this project together as we speak. Like, in fact, I'm going to be meeting some people this weekend that I'm working with to kind of get a pitch deck and put this out there. Mm-hmm. So I go to the state's attorney. So Cleve Heidelberg gets charged with shooting this police officer at a botched robbery at a drive-in movie theater. I find the guy who borrowed Cleve Heidelberg's car and gave it to the real killer. And then I got the brother of the real killer to come say, yeah, my brother did this murder. He told me he did the murder. And there was a reason he did the murder. It was a crazy backstory. 1970, there was a famous shooting in 1969 in Chicago. Fred Hampton of the Black Panthers, this charismatic 21-year-old guy, got shot and killed by the police. Another guy got shot and killed from Peoria named Mark Clark, who was his security guy. The guy who killed the police officer was his brother, who wanted to kill a police officer for revenge. Anyway, I go to the state's attorney in Peoria. I say, I got these two witnesses you need to talk to. The guy who borrowed the car and the guy whose brother committed the murder. Mm-hmm. He says, well, let me, check it out. Month goes by. He calls me up. He's like, no, I'm not going to really do anything. I'm like, did you talk to those guys? Nah, this guy, I'm pretty sure he's guilty. He did not even interview my witnesses. The only person he talked to, and I know this because I FOIA'd his phone records, was the former prosecutor of the case, who was his mentor and buddy.
Oh, interesting.
Are you kidding me?
Now, I wonder if he had like a kind of a, kind of a gag order, like, hey, don't look into this. Because that's like the other part too, where there's like, you want to just throw someone away, call it a case closed. It's, it's one of their, brothers of the police department stuff. And they just kind of like have that swept under the rug, because if this guy's seeking revenge, you know what I mean? Like that murder was like kind of a big deal, right? Like the leader of the Black Panthers, that was there's a motive
for that murder.
Yeah.
But for this guy, this is what's crazy too, is state's attorneys really don't even have accountability, because, there's really nothing I could do, to make him do his job.
Right.
Like there's nothing I could do.
Right.
I mean, he literally did not even talk to my witness. Think about that. Think about how egregious that is.
Yeah.
That he did not even care what these guys had to say. And there's no recourse. It's the same way now in my Starved Rock Murders case. I got a genetic genealogy result. There's a hair found on one of the ladies, got picked up, inventoried at the crime scene in 1960. I did DNA testing on it. It's a male profile, not my client, Chester Uyghur. Mm-hmm. And I could take it one step further. Genetic genealogy, which is crazy cutting edge technology. Yeah. You can now get a genetic sequence, and you can find out whose hair that is.
Yeah.
Which I hired a lab in Texas. Shout out to Othram. They are unbelievable. I'm telling you, remember that name.
Yeah.
Othram is going to be, they're solving cases like every day.
Yeah.
So they do this, they get a genetic sequence because this hair had a root. They said, Andy, it's one of 3 local brothers, this hair. It's these 3 brothers, the Bray brothers. And I went to the state's attorney's office. I'm like this should be game over.
Yeah.
And they're like, they just like, I'm like, are you kidding me? It's not enough with everything else I got?
Yeah, it blows my mind.
They just don't care.
Right.
Like, what's the explanation for this guy's hair? I mean, these women got beaten to a pulp, dragged into a cave, bodies displayed, and there's hairs on this lady's finger with a root on it.
Yeah.
That come back to one of these brothers. Okay. And there is no way that the person was at the crime scene.
Absolutely.
They're part of the
probably
crime.
A defensive thing. You know what I mean?
So for them just to act like this is no big deal it makes me want to scream.
Yeah. How do you keep your calm, like with all these roadblocks and with them saying that they want justice and all this stuff, but they're doing everything in their power to keep justice from actually happening. It's got to be so frustrating.
I'm glad actually, that we've kind of, we got to talk about this because I'm trying to raise more awareness, not just to my cases, but the issue of, prosecutors and state's attorney's offices not being open to new evidence, not being open to somebody might be wrongfully convicted, and just doing nothing. I mean, the only thing you can really do is try to vote these people out.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, how do you change the system?
Because even in my Starve Rock Murders case, I went to the judge. I actually tried to replace the state's attorney's office. I said, Judge, they're not doing their job. I got all these witnesses.
They probably hate you.
Yeah. They hate me. They hate me big time. There's no doubt about that.
Your picture's on their dartboard.
This asshole's back again.
Yeah. In fact, I just filed a FOIA lawsuit against them because I'm trying to get
you, man. That is
I'm trying to get the guy's phone records. This guy, I mean, think about this. This is so egregious. The case is from 1960. Okay. It was the crime of the century. I mean, seriously, it was in Life magazine. It was a huge deal. They collected a ton of evidence. And I told him, I said, I'd like to look at the evidence. He's like, let me think about it. Then he tells me, no. He's like, no, it's complete garbage. It all got kind of put shuffled together. I said, well, if it's all complete garbage, just let me look at it. And then it is what it is. He said, no, I don't think so. So I went to court. The judge said, no, I'm going to let Mr. Hale look at the evidence. I went to look at the evidence. Oh my God. So organized.
Oh, really?
Glass slides, everything's labeled, envelopes, everything's labeled. This guy fucking lied to me about everything. If you listen to all my Starve Rock Murders podcasts from start to finish, I'm constantly blasting the state's attorney's office. I mean,
isn't there like a Hippocratic
they deserve
oath
it
with like that where, with doctors with that, where like, you have to kind of do your due diligence as, a prosecutor.
There's no accountability.
I was just going to say that the accountability is like,
the judge even said, he's like, Mr. Hale, I don't have the jurisdiction to compel him to interview your witnesses. It's more like a, I'd have to bring some kind of bar complaint, against the Illinois bar, which is like, that's
but
going
then
nowhere.
Where's that going?
It's going nowhere.
You got to get those probably the same
people. You got
people.
a couple people. I'm sure you're not the only person in the Chicagoland area that's trying to, to do some work on some cold cases or wrong convictions and stuff. And I have a feeling he's not just a roadblock for you, but for other people as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I will say this, in Cook County, where Chicago is, the state's attorney has been very liberal in reviewing cases and letting people out. I think to some people think too much.
Yeah.
I'm in Will County, which is in the suburbs in Joliet, and in Peoria is downstate Illinois, 2.5 hours south.
Yeah.
And it's just much more like hard ass prosecutors who just do not have any interest in getting to the truth. A prosecutor, that just drives me crazy because their job is to seek justice.
Yeah,
right.
It's not just to convict.
Yeah.
If, I say this a lot because when we do police cases, the way it works is I'm a detective. I get assigned to try to solve a murder. I think I've solved it. I bring to you, Tony, you're the state's attorney.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, here's my evidence. You don't have to accept it. You could say, I don't think that's enough. Go back out there and get more. You don't have to just rubber stamp what I'm doing.
Right.
The state's attorney's the kind of the check. You're like, you want to make sure things are done fair and it's justice and it's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And so many state's attorneys just have no interest in it. And that I think is the biggest problem.
Yeah, they want the win, they want the W, and they just want to keep their jobs and keep getting reelected.
By the way, you said bartender. This is pretty good gin and tonic. Thanks. Gotta say, it's very delicious.
Yeah, me too. I would
agree. I was
this is
pat myself
tasty.
on my back. And
it's
a good job, Tony.
And I appreciate you getting the ice. It's good.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Classy guy. It's interesting because there's a lot of the down south states that if I forget what case I was watching something on, but the guy was clearly innocent, but they wouldn't let him out of jail unless they had someone to take his place. Have you heard about that kind of stuff before? Where there's
no,
I think it's Texas or Arkansas or something like that. Real backwards. Where if you're convicted for a crime, you're the bad guy now. And the only way you're getting out if you find the other bad guy to take your place. Like that's the most backwards ass thing I've ever heard.
The hard part with that is, you know, it's really hard sometimes to find like I know I didn't do it.
Yeah.
But I can't prove who did.
Yeah.
Like in the Stavrak murders case, you know, I mean, we got the genetic genealogy result. One of these three brothers was there, but there were more people there. And the thing I've learned is it is really hard. I mean, I've been working on the Stavrak murders case for 7 years.
Really?
7 years. I have hired the best experts. I hired Othram Genetic Genealogy. I hired Bodhi Technology for DNA testing. I hired Microtrace, who are these phenomenal microscopists. And I've compiled, I am like, I should have vacated this conviction 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm still fighting.
Yeah, to overturn a conviction is like damn near impossible.
I got another guy that I'm trying to prove his innocence. His name is James Tevel. Shout out to him. Got arrested for double murder, not far from where I live. I know he didn't do it. But it's hard. It's fucking hard. If you don't have like a lot of physical evidence to test and there's not people you can talk to,
I think it's the physical evidence thing is the biggest thing, because even in that Bone Valley, the guy that actually did the murder confessed to it, was in front of a jury and was like, I killed her. I did it, and gave all this detail about it. And they're like, no, we can't trust him because he's a liar and he was already in jail for other murders. But they're like, no, we're just not going to like bring that. It's like,
if you listen to my episode with Gilbert King, when I talk about that, when the real killer got interviewed, he was so credible to me. The detail, the way he told that story, like if you were just making up a story, I've seen this where like there'd be no details, it'd be very short stories. Like, I saw the girl walking on the street and I killed her. Like this guy he told it slow. He was like, a car went over the train tracks and started to swerve, and like he told it in slow detail. Like it was so compelling. There's no way, if you're being fair, that you didn't listen to this guy and think, oh my God, this guy's the killer. For sure. And in fact, in my case, when I was trying to get Will County, trying to replace them, I actually found a great law review article from like Boston College Law Review that talked about how prosecutors have this inherent conflict of interest and bias. Some people it's overt. Some people it's just like, they're like, fuck you. I'm not looking at this case. But there's also, like they said, like an inherent kind of bias where they're thinking to themselves like, well, what if I vacate this conviction? What are my constituents going to think? The people that voted me into office. What are my colleagues going to think?
Or the mentor thing, like you said.
And so this system is set up in a way where, there's not really an incentive to get to the truth, and that's what just really, really frustrates me. So,
except for that's the whole point of your job. That's like, that is the biggest incentive. Is like you are literally actually doing your job, but by you not like looking at any of these like and trying to overturn any of these convictions, it's insane that that's just something that we're just okay with. And there's nothing you can do.
No, it's just it's a real issue for sure.
Yeah, that's it's so frustrating watching all those and listening to all those same stories, and it's the same roadblocks that happen in every one of those, and you're like, well, how do you fix that stuff?
That's why I really want to try to do some kind of project, something to bring media attention to the issue.
Well, like the Innocent Project, I know like when they are kind of involved, like it kind of puts pressure. It kind of puts a magnifying glass on whatever state or county that had, someone that was wrongfully incarcerated. It kind of like, I think it scares the shit out of anybody that's involved in those, because it's like, and especially if they're getting national attention and you're bringing national.
Well, that's why I think the biggest thing is what I like to do is to use the media, and by media I mean documentary, movie, podcast, social media, whatever, newspaper articles, to shine a light on injustice. Cases where state attorneys aren't doing their job, people are innocent. Like I always try to use the media to put pressure on. I mean, Will County, I've been blasting him in my podcast. I'm like, taking out ads in newspapers.
Really
there's an ad today in today's 2 papers in the area where the Stavrak State Park is, in the LaSalle News Tribune and the Ottawa Times. I took out a full page ad today talking about all my evidence, and I have a tip line. Like call this number if you know anything, you know? I want people to know the evidence that I've uncovered already.
Yeah.
But you need to put pressure on these people, like, to do their job.
How long ago was the Stavrek one? How many years ago?
So it was 1960.
Okay.
3 wealthy women from Chicago, like they're all around 50. Husbands are all like really successful businessmen. Lived in Riverside, Illinois, which is like a wealthy little suburb. Came down to this beautiful Starved Rock State Park for like a little like, you know, women's trip for like a couple of days to go hiking. Mm-hmm. They check into the lodge, they have lunch, they go for a hike, they don't come back. And 2 days later, their bodies are found in this little shallow cave in a scenic, beautiful area, beaten to a pulp.
Oh my God.
And what's crazy is I really started my podcast. HBO did that doc. We kind of, you know, I told some people I knew about the story, and it's such a compelling story. So HBO did a 3-part docuseries on it that came out, I think, in December of 2020, which was awesome because they shined a light on the case.
Yeah.
But all the evidence I've learned has come since then. Okay. If you watch that HBO doc, you're kind of like,
See, you know, HBO
maybe he did it. Let's do some DNA testing.
The thing that's cool about HBO is, I don't know if you're familiar with like the Paradise Lost series they did. You remember that? It was like the West Memphis 3.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So the initial one they did was like right when the case happened, right?
Yeah.
And then they did, you know, a subsequent second and third, you know, follow up with that. And, you know, if you still have those contacts with the evidence that you have, plus, you know, the asshole, like, you know, state's attorney that's not, you know, following up, I really think you could lean some pressure on them, and they might actually try to go around and do another follow-up one.
Oh, I think so. And the reason I did my podcast was to try to develop more evidence. I mean, I did the podcast as a way to kind of bring awareness to the case. And what I was very transparent, like every episode, if you go to my podcast website, so andyhale.podcast.com, little plug there.
Yeah. Please do.
Every time I talk about a police report or a court transcript or an expert report, I post it. It's all, you can read it. I'll say on the podcast, look, I'm not making this up.
Yeah.
Go read the document.
Yeah. It's all public,
it's all there.
Yeah.
And I have learned so much on my podcast. And I had a couple, I mean, the biggest things were, I had a woman reach out to me. I may have told you this. She sent me a Facebook message like, hey, you know, I know exactly how this all happened. Call me. I was like, you know, I've had a lot of people reach out. I was like, I call up. Something in me just said, hey, do you mind if I tape this call?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, go ahead. I didn't know what she was going to tell me.
Yeah.
She tells me that she was in high school, living in a suburb of Chicago. It's called Norwich, near where I live. Totally old school Italian little town. My grandfather was in the Chicago Mafia. I used to run errands for him. He was dying of lung cancer, and he told me that this guy in prison for the Stavrek murders is innocent. And the reason he knows that is one of the husbands wanted his wife killed, hired the Chicago Mafia to do it, and my grandfather handpicked the guys who went down there and did it. I was like, holy shit. She tells me she's on the phone, right?
Yeah.
And she's telling it to me in a very... That's a whole podcast episode, by the way. You can listen to that whole call.
I'm going to listen to your whole podcast.
Yeah.
That organic call is on, it's a whole podcast episode. That's right there. Crazy. Unedited. I get on a plane the next day. I fly out of state. I don't want to say where because I'm protecting her. I fly out of state. Okay. It's not even close to me. I go meet her face to face and I take a deposition under oath. She was crying. She was shaking.
No way.
Like, there is no way. If you had 100 people in the room watching this and you said, okay, how many people think she's making this up?
Right.
Not one hand would have gone up.
Yeah.
Like, no way. Like, and this also jived with other evidence that I've developed of it being kind of like...
She's got to be like in her 80s, right?
No, this woman's kind of young because it was her grandfather.
Okay.
Right.
So she's young. She's maybe in her 40s.
Yeah.
And then I had another guy reach out to me with a similar story, with a mob connection. So the podcast it's done exactly what I was hoping.
Nice.
It has led people to me with tips and information.
Yeah.
So I presented all this to the state's attorney's office. The whole thing, you know, this woman said it's a mob hit. This guy said it's a mob hit. All this stuff I've got. And by the way, I got a hair found one of the ladies. It's one of these 3 brothers. And they're all like,
Now, did she mention any of the brothers when?
No. I mean, the thing is, I don't know much about these brothers. Yeah. What's hard is the case is so old. It's 1960.
Yeah.
That, and a lot of the evidence is gone. Man, if I'd have gotten this case fresh.
Yeah.
But I think about Chester Weger, my client. This is the story I tell. He gets convicted, right? He's 21. It's 1960. So you go into like his prison cell. You say, hey, buddy, I got good news for you. There's a guy who's going to help prove your innocence, but he's not born yet. He's going to be born in 1962. And then he's got to go to kindergarten. He's got to go to high school. He's got to go to college. He's got to go to law school. He's got to practice law for like 25 years, 30 years. And then he's going to take your case.
Because this guy's like 85 or something, right?
Now. And then he's going to take your case and he's going to be your champion.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine? And
no, and then
let me just tell you this other story too. I feel like I'm talking too much here.
Not at all. No. That's the whole point of being on here.
Yeah, this is great.
This goes back to also what I say, everything in life is an opportunity and how you create your own opportunities. I firmly believe you create your own opportunities. Do you see in this room? There's opportunities everywhere. Do you see them? They're all over. I see them all over. I was representing Cleve Heidelberg, the guy in Peoria, who I got out after 47 years, which at the time I think was the longest wrongful conviction.
Really?
Before I got him out, he was up for parole, okay? When you're up for parole, it basically is, they want you to express remorse.
Right.
And say, I feel bad. I'm sorry I committed the crime, but I've been in prison 45, 47 years. I've paid my debt. He would never express remorse because he's like, I didn't fucking kill this guy.
Yeah.
So I didn't know this. So he's up for parole. He's denied. The next day in the Chicago Tribune, there's a front page article, Starved Rat Killer denied parole. I never heard of this guy. I didn't know anything about it. And it's like, yeah, Chester Weger, Starved Rat Killer, been in prison 50 plus years, refused to express remorse, said he didn't do it, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, this guy sounds like Cleve Heidelberg's twin brother.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, this just sounds exactly like Cleve Heidelberg.
Yeah.
I wrote Chester Weger a letter. I said, hey, I'd like to come talk to you. And I say this to everybody that reaches out to me. I said, look, I'll look into your case, but I'm not going to try to put a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah. Right.
If I feel like, kind of like, and I've had cases like this, like I feel like you're guilty.
Yeah.
No harm, no foul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started looking at his case. I'm like, holy shit. I think this guy, and then now I'm convinced, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
But I think there was such a narrative over the years that like he confessed to the crime.
Yeah.
And in 1960, we didn't understand the concept of false confessions.
Yeah.
Right.
Now we know that it can happen. We can debate how often it happens, but 100% it happens. So I get this a lot. People are like, well, I would never confess. And the example I always give is there's a well-known case in Chicago. The dad's name was Kevin Fox. This is maybe 10 years ago. You can look this up. His wife's out of town at like a breast cancer walk. They got like a 4-year-old daughter. He goes to like a concert that night with one of his buddies. The little girl stays with like the in-laws. He picks her up at like midnight, takes her home. Next morning, wakes up, she's not there. She's gone. Police are like, thinking, rightfully so, he's a suspect.
Right.
But they hone in on him. They go hard on the interrogation. He winds up confessing to killing and sexually assaulting his daughter. Okay. And then what he says is, I needed it to end. I needed to get out of there.
Right.
I just thought I can prove none of this happened.
Right.
Okay. Turns out all that was bogus. They wind up years later through, finding evidence and the real guy who killed her and all this stuff. My point is, it's the best case is an example of this guy falsely confessed to killing his daughter. So until you're in the hot seat, until you're sitting there being interrogated for hours by detectives, you can't say like, well, I would never do that. Right. You don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't know.
It's especially when they prey on the young kids, when they're like, oh, well, you just say that you just fill this out and write your confession and you can get out of here and stuff. And that's like a thing you hear time and time again, where it's just like this kid that's like, either of adult age or right under, and just wants to get home, and they're just
most of wrongful confessions. I mean, some of the factors, one of them is, you're younger and you're uneducated. I mean, the bottom line is you shouldn't even talk.
Right.
Okay. That's
right.
People like, my advice to anybody out there, even if you're innocent, please come to your door. Can I talk to you? Like, nope. I'm going to call a lawyer right now. Like, they want to just be like, yeah, come on in. Let's talk.
Yeah.
It's funny because they always try to like play that thing on. It's like, well, you ask for an attorney. That means you're obviously guilty. It's like, no, it means you're fucking smart. You're fucking smart. And you're
exactly.
To jail.
My advice, if anybody comes to your house and they want to interview you about some crime, it's like, nope.
Yeah.
I am going to get a lawyer and blah, blah, blah. But my point is, Chester Weger confessed. And as soon as he got a public defender appointed, he recanted it and explained it all. Testified at his own trial. But, everyone just, in 1960, people didn't, they weren't aware.
They're just like,
his story was so laughable because the confession was, and even when I met with the Will County State's Attorney, he fucking told me he didn't believe the confession.
Really?
Like it made no sense. The story was, he's on his work break. He's a dishwasher at the lodge. Okay. So there's like a lodge at this beautiful state park. He's a 21-year-old dishwasher. He's on his work break. His confession is he runs into the ladies taking a hike, decides to rob them. Let's pause right there. Okay. He's going to rob ladies that he knows are staying at the lodge where he works. Right. All right. That makes no sense.
See you at lunch.
Yeah, right. Exactly. He grabs what he thinks is a purse. It's a binoculars case. There's like a argument, they're kind of yelling back and forth. He decides, okay, we're all going to go our own way. One of the ladies attacks him. All right, that makes no sense. He kind of fights her off, accidentally kills her. And then he's got to kill the other two ladies. And then he goes back to work. Now, let's pause. The crime scene is horrific. The ladies had they got beaten to a pulp. Like all three, like skulls fractured, faces not even recognizable. That's not consistent with even the story of like, oh, I had to just kill you.
Yeah,
like I could kill you with 2 blows.
Yeah.
Do I have to do 100?
Yeah.
Right.
And the blood, this guy would have been so bloody. He's going to go back to work?
Yeah.
Tell me another case ever where somebody massacred 3 people on their work break and went back to their job.
Yeah.
It's like, Eric just killed 3 people and went back to work.
Yeah.
He seemed fine to me. I didn't notice anything. It was ridiculous.
That's crazy.
It was ridiculous. This case is going to blow up.
I would wonder if they would have interviewed like some of his coworkers, like, oh yeah, he came back from war. You know what I mean? Like there's...
Well, what they did was months later when they were honing in on Chester Weger, like 8 months, he didn't get arrested for like 8 months later.
Oh, so like, okay.
Yeah,
I was going to say like they could have like maybe looked at his hands.
He passed 6 lie detector tests in the first 2 months.
No shit.
Wow.
Then later when they were honing in on him, like, 8 months later, they give him another polygraph, number 7. And they said, oh, you failed. And it's like, okay, really? He failed?
Yeah.
He passed the first 6?
A half a dozen.
And then they went to interview a lot of these employees at the lodge, and they're all like crazy stories of like, oh, he had scratches all on his face, up and down. He had scratches on his chest. All this crazy testimony. But back at the time of the murders, the state police were at the lodge interviewing everybody in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah.
There's no record of Chester Weger having scratches, and that would have stood up like a sore thumb. You know? It was all like BS nonsense that the prosecutors kind of like conjured up with these people.
Like, yo, did he look like
him?
Yeah,
like leading questions.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, this case is so outrageous. I will come back on. I want to come back on when I prove his innocence and I vacate it. Then
I want you to.
Then we'll really have a conversation.
That'd be incredible.
I have said, I did kind of a Muhammad Ali. I guaranteed it. I'm like, I guarantee you I'm going to prove his innocence. But I feel like I will. It's coming. Despite the Will County State's Attorney's Office, roadblock after roadblock after roadblock.
What's the term for that, the Will County State's Attorney's Office, like the actual prosecutor?
He's up for re-election, I think, like in November, but he's like, I think he's unopposed. He's like, the guy's like a 4-term incumbent. You
should put another ad in the paper, like, is anyone to take this guy's fucking job and actually follow
the letter of the law? Did you ever see the movie 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing? What's it like?
I know the movie.
Missouri? Yeah. Where the lady, took out 3 billboards.
Oh,
like, hey, Sheriff so-and-so, why aren't you doing your job?
Yeah.
I wanted to do that, like in Joliet, where he's at, like, hey, Jim Glasgow, what the fuck are you doing? Why aren't you investigating this case?
Yeah.
You let this guy die in fucking prison for something.
So like getting them out of jail is the one thing. And then getting them completely exonerated, is that like, that's a whole other part of that process too, right?
Chester Weger got parole, so he got released from prison.
But that's not exonerated.
But that's not exoneration. So he wants to be exonerated.
Yeah.
And to prove his innocence. And that's the hard part.
That's
I think the other part of the equation is the financial liability. That's kind of like the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
So like when I represent Chicago police officers in wrongful conviction cases, lawyers typically ask the jury to award as damages at least $1 million per year of incarceration.
Oh, wow.
And that's typically awarded. It's kind of like the norm.
The standard.
So if you got falsely arrested for any kind of crime, whatever it was, and let's say you spent a year in prison, your lawyers would ask for $1 million, for that year in prison.
I thought that was one of the things of why it's so hard to overturn. Because
in Chicago. So think about this. He spent over, 60 years in prison.
Yeah.
Now, again, Will County is not paying that money.
Right.
But I think they are in my opinion, they run in the same circles with the people that are on the hook.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, listen, if you do this, this is going to be $100 million.
Right. We don't have the money for it.
Yeah.
Like we can barely fund our own police systems.
Yeah. And so it becomes like the financial part, I think, is a factor when it shouldn't be. A state's attorney's job is to seek justice.
Right.
Whatever happens
That's
after that.
The sad thing is that like that poor sap's going to just sit and rot in prison so they can save themselves $100 million. You know what I mean? Like
a lot of times it's a lot less.
Secure the W.
It could be somebody
or be paroled, which is basically being in prison outside of prison with all these stipulations and rules that you can't live a normal life.
And then what happens is, like with Chester Weger, what's so sad is when he got arrested at 21 years old, he had two little kids under the age of like 3. It affects the whole family tree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the dad, the kids, their kids, all that is like dead branches on the family tree.
Yeah.
And you grow up with this stigma of like, oh, your dad was a Starved Rock murderer, killed 3 people.
Right, right.
And it's a miracle that Chester Weger is even alive at 85.
Yeah.
It's a miracle. I mean, you're in prison 60 plus years, poor health care,
and the fact that he's still saying that he's innocent. I kind of feel like,
I feel like they're kind of like trying to run the clock out on him.
Yeah,
that's what I
would
think.
imagine.
Because it's just delay.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 85, and I'm worried because Cleve Heidelberg, we got his conviction vacated, and then 10 months later, he died in his sleep.
No.
Now, I'm so grateful he died free.
Yeah.
He died,
But that's the thing. I feel like
it's just sad.
He got, his name cleared and then, could rest peacefully as opposed to being like, fighting for that. And that's kind of.
Yeah. It just, and I think I come at this, I think, with a lot of credibility because I have defended so many Chicago police officers in civil suits. And I've seen a lot of cases where the police did nothing wrong, even though they were being accused of doing something wrong.
Right.
I could give you so many examples of that. We could have a whole other podcast about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen kind of the bullshit cases.
Yeah.
And so I don't lightly say somebody's wrongfully convicted because I know that's a heavy thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
But I've defended police officers where they got accused of framing somebody.
Yeah.
And I felt like they didn't. I mean, I had a case where a lady confessed on videotape to killing her like 3-year-old son, strangling him. I don't know how she got her conviction vacated. I don't know how she did this. She got out of prison. She sued like 8 detectives, said they framed me. And I always think like, I don't know, I always I always start with the forensics, always.
Yeah.
And I hired a forensic pathologist. He looked at all the autopsy photos, all the medical records. He's like, Andy, this kid got strangled, 100%. He had like a ligature around his neck, like right here. She tried to say he accidentally hung himself on like this bunk bed cord. That would be like a V, like if you accidentally hang yourself like on blinds or something.
Yeah.
The other side had no expert because they couldn't get one. And so forensically, we proved it had to be the kid got strangled. And we won that case. My point is, that was the case where like the police got, I mean, that's a heavy, can you imagine like you're a police officer and you're talking to your son. Hey dad, what's this trial about? Well, Johnny, I got accused of, even though I knew this person was innocent, I framed him for murder and wanted to send them to prison for their whole life. Like that's a heavy, heavy thing.
It's a heavy enough job as it is, too.
And what I'm saying is I've been on both sides. So I would never accuse police of, wrongfully convicting somebody unless I really believed it. And in the cases where I represent people like Chester Weger and Cleve Heidelberg, I have felt that way strongly, and so I don't think there's many people out there like me who kind of have the experience, like, I've been on both sides. And so I'm calling the balls and strikes, and I'm calling them like I see them, I've had people approach me with cases like, hey, look into this case. I think this guy was wrongfully convicted. I'm like, I think they got the right guy in this one. I'll take a pass. You know what I mean?
I mean, how grateful are the families and the people that you're working with that, I would imagine someone being in jail that's like, oh my God, like finally somebody is going to be my voice and like sees this for what it is.
I mean,
thank God there's someone that is actually hearing me. Like that must be like like a miracle to them. Like you must be bringing so much hope and,
I've felt relief. A lot of love and gratitude, especially from the families I worked on, and it's a big commitment because I'm spending this money out of my own pocket, it's, it costs money to do DNA testing and genetic genealogy testing and to do all kinds of stuff.
Right. Which makes it more, much more admirable too. It's so crazy to say like, you just do this stuff.
But, having practiced law, like, my first bar exam was 1987, the Florida bar. I'm a member of the Florida, California, and Illinois bars. So it's been like 35 years. And as I've gotten older, I want to spend time on something that's super rewarding. And what's rewarding to me is I don't think there's anything more powerful than proving somebody's innocence. If there's somebody in prison who shouldn't be there, that to me is like the best use of my time. And I've gotten so much out of it. And I've said I'm so blessed to meet Alstory Simon from Murder in the Park, Cleve Heidelberg, Chester Weger. There's another guy we got out of prison after 22 years in Kankakee, Terrence Haynes. Like, it has been a blessing to meet these guys. And there's another guy I'm trying to help, got accused of a rape 20-something years ago. Crazy story. I'm convinced the girl just made it up. And this guy was kind of like a drug dealer at the time. The police wanted this guy off the streets. He's been in prison for 20 plus years.
For rape?
And he's, 16-year-old girl walking to high school, a block from high school where it's like crowded. Said, two guys, pulled out a gun, put me in the back of a car, drove down the alley, raped me for an hour, ejaculated in me and on me. They take her to the hospital. There's no semen in her. There's no semen on her. There's no physical corroboration of rape, no redness, nothing to suggest she had even had sex. And because this guy's black, police know him, drug dealer, they would have never even brought this case if it was like a white kid in a regular neighborhood. They'd been like, we're not charging this kid.
Yeah.
They have a trial, convicted. I don't know what went on. I don't know why she picked this guy out. There's something going on. And my client is still hot as a pistol 20-something years later. He gets out in February. And it's been fucking hard, man. We've been trying to prove his innocence, but it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, the girl has dug in. She doesn't want to admit she lied. And, we don't really have any, there is no physical evidence because there wasn't any.
Yeah.
It's not like it's somebody else's semen. There's no semen.
Right.
Yeah. And so, God. I mean, I've just seen this.
Chicago also?
This is actually another Peoria case, which is downstate. All these cases I got came about because of my first, once I did like the Cleve Heidelberg case, I had some people reach out to me that were in prison with Cleve Heidelberg. So what my point is, it can be super hard to prove your innocence.
Yeah.
Even though you didn't do it, 100% didn't do it. It can be, even with somebody like me, who's really, fighting for you.
Yeah.
And I still can't get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still struggling,
That's like the general like consistency through all those stories that you hear and the documentaries that are made. It's like all the same hurdles and the same roadblocks and the same problems. And it's like, it's just an uphill battle. It seems like such an like that's an understatement.
It's scary. I mean, what's scary is if you get arrested for a crime and somehow convicted for a crime you didn't commit. And this is a story I hear from everybody. Like the guy on the rape, he's like, I said, what'd you think when you got arrested? He's like, I just like this bullshit. Like, I'm going to win this.
Yeah.
And when the jury comes back guilty, then you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Then you're like, what?
Yeah. Now it's like,
now it's real.
Yeah. Now you have to like,
now it's real.
Now
how do I undo this?
Yeah.
And that's a real heavy, scary thing, you know? And, I just, where I'm at now, I really enjoy and feel like I'm kind of doing something that's really like that I'm meant to do to try to help these people prove their innocence. The guys that I believe in, and trying to use the media, you know, like that first movie, Murder in the Park. And I don't know if you guys watched that. You should watch it. You can rent it on like Amazon.
Yeah.
That documentary, because we made the documentary, the guy who, this is crazy, this is the craziest story. The guilty guy gets out, they coerced a confession from the innocent guy. And it was like the Northwestern's Innocence Project at the time. We were making our documentary about it, and the state's attorney, this guy had been trying to prove his innocence for like 10 years. Once the state's attorney's office got wind of our documentary, they really rolled up the sleeves and said, oh, we better check this out. And then you know what? They wound up investigating it and vacating the conviction because of the documentary. So like the pressure we brought, we're like, we're going to do a documentary. They wanted to be on the right side of it. So the last scene of the movie is literally the press conference with the Cook County State's Attorney vacating the conviction.
Yeah. And
then I'll never forget this. Like this guy's name was Alstory Simon. He's got a box. He's holding a box. He's about to walk out the door after 16 years. All his possessions are in this box. That's his life. Yeah. He's holding this box and like, whatever his prison number was, like, what's your number? He's like 16804. Like, you're free to go. And he walks out the door with his cardboard box.
Yeah.
And like, my point is, if we don't do that documentary, Alstory Simon's still in prison.
Yeah, no shit.
And if Alstory Simon's still in prison, Cleve Heidelberg's still in prison. And if Cleve Heidelberg's still in prison, I don't know about the Chester Weger case. So all those things, go to my Connect podcast and listen to my episode about how you create opportunities. Because I don't want to, it's too long to explain here, but I talk about how I created all those opportunities for myself. And I go through like 6 crazy things, like this A led me to B, led me to C, led me to D, led me to E. Like you create those opportunities.
Well, you also kind of made yourself available for the people that like, you know, want to actually have their case looked at because of the work that you've done. So other people, you know, some that are really truly innocent and some are just trying to get the hell out of prison, but kind of making yourself being like the known guy that's like really going to actually.
And I'm happy, you know, like I'm always willing to look, you know?
Yeah.
Like I said, there's some that I've like, I had somebody come to me like as a very well-known Chicago case.
How much time will you have to invest to like really get a gauge on if this is bullshit or not?
It takes a little bit of time. It takes some time. Like I want to look at all the police reports and like forensic reports. But like in this one particular case, I looked at all the documents. I'm like, I mean, that's a whole nother, we could do a whole other podcast about that. And I actually think there's a story there too, because I think there's some people out there that they're just trying to like, oh, I exonerated, you know, somebody.
Yeah.
And like, oh, great. You just got let this fucking killer loose. You know, great job. Right. You know, like they're doing it for their own ego.
Right.
And their own satisfaction, but they're not really qualified.
Right.
We got to wrap it up, but there's a case like that.
We're done already?
Yeah, we are. I know
that
was like a fast hour.
There was the girl that was in Italy that got so she got out, right?
Yeah.
And then she helped get another guy out of prison for a similar type case, I think down in Florida, him and his girlfriend or something like that. And then she found out that he was actually guilty. And then there's like this, you know, that kind of like, what do you do now? Because now is your job to try to get him back into prison. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and once you're out, you're out. Is there anything you want to ask me that we didn't cover? Like I kind of like, you know, just we took this a certain way.
No, that was fascinating. That was like,
well, we'll definitely have to back you out.
Yeah,
go watch Murder in the Park. You can.
Everyone watch Murder in the Park.
It was on Netflix and Showtime. But you can rent it on Amazon. The Murders at Starved Rock was on HBO. You can stream that. And then this Cleve Heidelberg one, literally Saturday. If you want to, I'm gonna be on Saturday. I'm gonna be meeting you guys. I'll probably see you Saturday.
Okay.
Meeting with my team. We're putting together a pitch deck and a sizzle about this Cleve Heidelberg case.
Awesome.
It's super compelling. The footage is incredible. And I tell you what, the last thing I'll say, I've had the pleasure of having this happen a couple times. When you're standing there, like Cleve Heidelberg, and he's walking out of prison after 47 fucking years, and you're there. It's just like I got goosebumps now.
Yeah, I do too, man. That's like it's because of you too. That's the main thing.
And I'll tell you one last thing. The Peoria State Attorney's Office were such jerks. He first got out like on bail, and they said we want a bond of like $5 million, which means we'd have to post 10%, which is $50,000. It's a lot of money. I mean, Cleve Heidelberg's family has no money. Where are we gonna get $50,000?
Yeah.
I do a Facebook message. I'm like, hey, I got good news. I got bad news. Good news is Cleve Heidelberg got his conviction, vacated, like he's going to be released, but we need $50,000. If anybody can chip in. Yeah. And I thought maybe I can cobble together 500 here. I had one guy used to work with in LA call me up. He's like, how much you need? I was like, he sent me the whole 50,000.
No shit.
No way.
Unbelievable. So Cleve Heidelberg didn't even know we were getting him out that day.
Really?
We walk over to, we had a cashier's check for $50,000.
Crazy.
And I got footage of this. I'll send it to you guys. When Cleve Heidelberg walked out free after 47 years, there's nothing like it.
I can imagine.
It's just incredible.
Like, yeah.
It's just incredible. And so Chester Weger's already out of prison, but if I can prove his innocence before he passes, that's my drop the mic. Anything after that, I'm done. Like,
sweet.
I don't, whatever I accomplish in life after that is like the cherry on top.
Yeah.
That is my mission, though. I am so focused. That is my mission.
So
I believe you're going to do it.
Yeah, I think so too. And
I
I can't wait for you to come back on and let us know that he's exonerated. He's out of prison.
I'll fly out here just for it. I mean, there's no doubt I will come out here just to record an episode with you about it.
Done.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah. And, I'll let you choose the cocktail next time.
These are great. These are super good.
Yeah.
I'm a gin guy now.
Yeah. I think that might be a new drink.
You kind of touched on plugging your podcast and stuff, but do all your plugs now. This is the part of the show. My podcast, you go to AndyHale.podcast.com. That's where my podcasts are. And AndyMHale.com shows you all my little bio and all my media projects. But I think the Starved Rock Murders is the podcast I'm most proud of because it's just an organic journey of me investigating the highs, the lows. I mean, there were times where there's roadblocks and we're down, and then there's times where like tremendous breakthroughs, like this woman calling me up, and telling me about her grandfather and the mob. Like, and that's a whole podcast episode. That phone call you can listen to organically. Like, I'm like, what? I mean, it's crazy. So
Instagram?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram too. Andy M. Hale on Instagram. So check it all out. It's all there. Absolutely. And if anybody out there is hearing this and they think they know somebody who's wrongfully convicted, reach out. I'd love to hear it. I'll check it out. I always tell people that I'm all ears. If there's anybody else out there that's in prison that shouldn't be,
Andy's your guy.
I'm your guy. Yeah.
Hey, it's been a pleasure. I'm really honored that you were on the show.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
This is so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on here, Andy.
Absolutely.
If you want to hear me talk and do jokes and stuff, check out my Tony Klein comedian Instagram. That's I feel like just I have nothing going on. I've saved no one's life. I created a life though.
Go to one of Tony's comedy shows. If you want to see me, it's on this podcast. It's the Eric and Tony Show. You can go to the ericandtonyshow.com. You can buy yourself a beer mug, a t-shirt, so you can watch our podcast wearing our apparel and drinking our glass mugs and all that stuff. We post the full episode on YouTube every Monday, the full audio on Spotify every Monday as well. And then every single day we post 60-second clips of the podcast on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. So you can follow us on any of those channels to follow along and see what we got going on. Thank you again, Andy, for being on the podcast. This was excellent.
I loved it.
So interesting. And can't wait to
tell me
have
when
you
and
on.
I'll be out here again.
Awesome.
Anytime you want.
Anytime my
you
friend.
want. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Andy.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the show. Peace.
It's a wrap.
That's it.